Firearms and the legalities surrounding their availability and use in the United States of America is one of the most consistent and heated debates in American history. This is a sensitive issue and must be treated with respect, as no one side is entirely right or wrong. I am fully ready to admit that I am not an expert, even if I wear a suit and tie. However, what I am is a concerned citizen who wants to make sure that whatever decision is or is not made is well informed and thought out. So please humor me, as I would like to discuss firearms from the most rational and matter-of-fact position that I can. I'm going to break this video into 4 parts. Part 1, defining what a firearm is and what a cartridge is, as well as the difference between semi-automatic and fully automatic. Part 2, what is the mechanical functionality of a firearm and what other tools can accomplish that same task? Part 3, my thoughts on legal uses of firearms. Part 4, my thoughts on what legislation should be in place regarding firearms. If you disagree with any part of the video or any of the arguments, please feel free to comment, and hopefully we can have a calm and rational discussion on the topic, which is what this topic deserves, yet rarely gets. So let's define a firearm first. If you look at the definition of a firearm on Google, you will get a rifle, pistol, or other portable gun. While this is not wrong, this is a very broad definition that I do not believe is adequate enough for our discussion. So for this video, I would like to define a firearm as a human portable device that uses a chemical explosion to propel a projectile in a controlled, repeatable manner. To go a little bit further with this, a chemical explosion is and includes a gunpowder ignition or other forms of fuel burning to create a pressure wave. Controlled means this device can choose the vector from which the projectile will move. Repeatable means the device can perform this action more than once without extensive maintenance on the device. Is this definition perfect? No. Does it encompass what most U.S. civilians have access to legally? I would say yes. Okay, now let's talk about the 4 parts of a cartridge and the 3 core parts of a firearm. Almost all modern firearms use cartridges to fire, as they are easy to use and less dangerous than manual loading. A cartridge is broken into 4 core parts. 1. The projectile. Usually made of lead, this will be pushed out of the firearm from the ignition of the fuel. 2. Fuel. This is almost exclusively gunpowder, but could be different, and when ignited creates the pressure wave pushing the projectile. 3. The casing. This holds all the parts together and contains and directs the explosion. Last but not least is 4. The primer. This is a contact-sensitive explosive that will ignite the fuel when struck by the firing pin of the firearm. Now, onto the 3 core parts of a firearm. Just to note, most firearms are more complicated than this, but for the sake of time, I'm going to simplify things to only list the required parts. 1. The barrel. This is the path the projectile will take to exit the firearm. 2. The chamber. This is the system that holds the cartridge in position so it's ready to fire. 3. The trigger assembly. This is the series of parts that upon activation will strike the primer of the cartridge, firing the firearm. Lastly, let's explain the difference between fully automatic and semi-automatic firearms. These terms are frequently misused and, if used improperly in legal documents, could cause unintended consequences or confusing legal problems. First, a semi-automatic firearm is a firearm that when the trigger is pulled only once, 1 bullet will be fired. So 1 trigger pull equals 1 bullet out. Given this, a semi-automatic firearm can only shoot as fast as the user can pull the trigger. Second, a fully automatic firearm or automatic firearm is a firearm where 1 pull of the trigger can fire multiple rounds until the trigger is released or the firearm runs out of ammunition. Fully automatic firearms are very difficult to purchase legally and are reserved almost exclusively to military and police personnel. Okay, now that we know how to define a firearm and how the core parts of a firearm work, let's talk about the functionality of such a device. The first step of understanding the functionality of anything is to analyze what it does from a purely mechanical perspective. So what does a firearm do from a mechanical perspective? Functionality-wise, it is a tool that puts a hole in distant objects. It accomplishes this by accelerating a projectile to a high velocity which impacts a target, normally putting a hole in that target depending upon the speed and mass of the projectile and the strength of the target. So, are there other tools that could accomplish this same task? Yes, there are other tools that can accomplish the same task, with varying degrees of effectiveness, cost, and practicality. Let's name a few. Bows and arrows, remote explosives, compressed air cannons, and even high-powered lasers. All of these can put holes in distant objects. Each has their own strengths and weaknesses in regards to how efficient and effective they are on a variety of fronts. Okay, so now we move on to what use could there be for a tool that creates holes in targets from a distance, From this point on, this is my opinion, and I do not expect anyone to agree with me. I just hope I can spark a positive discussion on the topic. Part 3. My thoughts on the legal uses for a firearm. Okay, let's talk about what I think the legal uses for a firearm are. Obviously, a firearm can be used for illegal purposes. However, because we have already defined these as being illegal, there's no argument to be made as to the legality of them. Murder is illegal, and if it's committed with a firearm or a knife, it doesn't matter. Threatening someone is illegal regardless of the weapon that's used for the threat. So instead, I would like to focus on the legal standing of currently legal activities with firearms and both arguments for and against them. First, let's talk about hunting. Hunting is currently legal in most states during specific hunting seasons and usually requires the hunter to get a permit allowing them to hunt. The exception to this rule is you are allowed to hunt on your own property at any time. Now, I'm not going to talk whether or not hunting is ethical, or that is an entirely different discussion. However, the question is, should a civilian have the right to own a firearm for hunting? An argument saying firearms should not be permitted for hunting goes under the logic saying that any firearm is unnecessary and overkill when it comes to hunting, as bows and arrows are effective enough. While I would venture to guess most individuals in the United States who hunt are not hunting for survival, this may not seem like an unreasonable restriction, as hunters could continue to hunt with other tools if they so choose. However, the key word I used before was most. I have to bring to the table the fact that there are still people in America who live in very remote locations, such as parts of Alaska and the upper Midwest, where they do hunt regularly for food. Requiring these individuals as American citizens to turn in their firearms means their way of life would come to an end, as hunting with a bow is far more difficult and less efficient than a firearm. The point here is just because the majority of people don't need something doesn't mean that there is not someone who does. Second, personal defense. Now, this is not just restricted to defense against other humans, as we will get to that. This includes defense against wild animals as well. It is no surprise that as humans spread out of our cities and venture out into the wilderness, there are animals that are not too happy about us showing up and destroying their homes so we can build ours. There are a lot of cases where people have been killed by everything from bears and wolves to deer and boars. The human body is surprisingly frail, and the only reason we have become as successful as a species is because of the tools we create. Firearms are just one tool in the line of many that we have used to defend ourselves against nature. So I'd like to put forward 2 examples. First, let's say you and someone else have decided to go camping, and while you are on your way to your campsite, you encounter a mother bear and her cubs. Now, this is clearly a dangerous situation, as mother bears are notoriously protective of their children. And if this did happen, ideally, you would be able to back away slowly, and the bears would go on their way. However, there is a distinct possibility that even if you do everything right, that bear may decide to attack. If you found yourself in this situation, would you prefer to have a firearm on hand or not? In that case, I would personally want a firearm to protect myself, if it came to that. The second example is that of a chicken farmer who has a fox problem. This farmer has noticed chickens going missing and has now seen a fox attempting to break into his chicken enclosure. What should the farmer do in this case? Should he call the police or animal control so they can take care of the fox? Most farmers do not live a short drive away from their local police station, so it could take 15 to 20 minutes or more for the police to show up, which may be too late and the fox has eaten its fill and left. So calling the police may not be practical. Could the farmer attempt to scare the fox away? Yes, that is an option, but the farmer does not know for certain that the fox would not panic and attack him instead, so he may not be willing to take that risk. The other option is if the farmer had a firearm, he could shoot and kill the fox. Is it unreasonable in that case for the farmer to have a firearm that he could use to defend his livestock and himself from wildlife on his farm? I leave that question up to you. Now, on the other side of personal defense, protecting yourself from human threats. I will only be talking about defending yourself from someone who is actively committing a crime. Drawing a gun on someone because you don't like the way they look or because they insulted you are under no circumstances self-defense. If anything, you are the criminal in that case. I will agree, most Americans who live in reasonably populated areas, if they feel in danger, could call the police and they would arrive in a reasonable amount of time. Given this, most Americans would not require a firearm for self-defense, as the police would be adequate. However, if you live 20 to 30 minutes from the nearest police station and someone is trying to assault, murder, or rape you, Even if you are able to call the police, 30 minutes is enough time for you, the victim, to be seriously injured or killed. Should someone have the right to own a firearm to defend themselves in that case? This is a question you have to ask yourself. Personally, I believe you should have that right. You may disagree with me, and that's fine. But I believe that if I ever live in a situation where I feel my safety is in danger and the police are not capable of responding in time, I should have the ability to defend myself and my family if it comes to that. The last legal activity a firearm can be used for is sports shooting. This could be basic target shooting, the popular 3-gun competition, or even Olympic skeet shooting. There are a variety of reasons why sport shooting is popular in the United States. But at the most basic level, sport shooting is effectively just practice to better the shooter's skills with the firearm. Now, should there be regulations on sport shooting? And if so, what types of regulations? I personally err on the side of safety when it comes to sport shooting. Regulations to ensure the shooting ranges are safe seem reasonable to me, as most ranges would want to ensure the safety of their members regardless. With this in mind, if you believe there is any reason at all, to own a firearm, having a safe place for the owner to learn how to properly handle and use the firearm without endangering themselves or others is a good thing in my opinion. So, those are what I believe are the legal uses for a firearm. If at this point you still believe no one should ever have access to any firearm, then we will have to agree to disagree on that point. So then, if we can agree there are legal reasons for someone to have a firearm, now we can talk about what restrictions we can or should put on the ability to purchase said legal firearm. Part 4. What legislation should we have? So, if you've watched to this point, you're probably well aware that I support the Second Amendment and believe that citizens should have the right to own firearms. With this in mind, I'm going to talk about what legislation I believe is reasonable in regards to firearms. There are some individuals who think buying a firearm should be as easy as buying an apple from a store, and there are also individuals who want months-long waiting periods with layers upon layers of background checks before someone is allowed to purchase a firearm. I think that there's a spot somewhere in the middle that both sides can find some common ground on. I have never met a pro-Second Amendment advocate who would not agree that firearms are dangerous. We know there is an inherent danger in that every time a firearm is used, malfunctions are possible and the firearm could be discharged unintentionally. So, personally, I believe some restrictions should be put in place to ensure the person purchasing a firearm has a physical and mental capacity to use it properly. There's an analogy I like to use when it comes to firearms that makes people on both sides of the issue upset at me because of this point of view. However, it is the closest analogy to how I believe firearms should be legally handled. That is, I believe firearms should be handled in a way that is similar to automotive vehicles. I'm sure some people watching are up in arms about me even suggesting this, but let me finish my analogy and then you are free to criticize me however you see fit. As a society, we have agreed that automotive vehicles, or cars as I will call them from now on, are dangerous but useful tools that a citizen has the right to own, and the uses outweigh the risks. However, if a citizen wants to drive their cars on public roads, they are required by law to have completed a series of tests to earn a driver's license stating that they are knowledgeable and capable of using a car correctly in public. If someone is caught driving on public roads without a government-sanctioned license or a vehicle that is not approved by the government, there are severe penalties that can be enforced. I think applying the same logic to firearms is not too far of a stretch. I have always believed more education is the best way to keep people safe. Also, using this analogy, we could extend it to be that different types of firearms require different licenses in order for them to be legally carried. Just as a normal driver's license doesn't allow you to drive a motorcycle, a normal rifle/shotgun license may not qualify you for a pistol. Is the system perfect? No. However, this does allow government officials to set standards for what they believe is proper firearms training and allows them to harshly penalize anyone who does not abide by those standards in public. This type of policy would allow the government to crack down on criminals who are carrying firearms illegally and not punish the law-abiding citizen who has the proper training and paperwork. Now, that analogy is done, I'm on to my conclusion. Okay. There are more things I could talk about on this topic, however, this video has gone on long enough, and I hate lecturing. Hopefully, I have given you the information you need to make an informed decision. Either way, I don't expect to have changed your mind. All I can hope for is that I have given you more information so when the topic comes up again, you are more capable to handle this discussion than you would have been in the past. If any one lesson can be taken from this video, let it be this. Just because you or people you know do not need something doesn't mean that there isn't someone out there who does need it. Please don't take any of the words I say here as final. Do your own research. The more you know, the better. Have a great day.